Got this ciabatta recipe from an Italian grandma at a Whole Foods who told me not to buy it myself while she was buying it because I was too young. So now I make it myself even during a snowstorm like this week. Same day, easy, and I make it all the time. The full recipe will be in the description, but I start off by measuring my water out on a scale because I don't feel like washing dishes just to get my yeast activated, and I just go ahead and warm that water up in the microwave before I add in anything else. And after 15 seconds in the microwave, I add in 1 teaspoon of yeast and 2 tablespoons of olive oil and get everything stirred on up. Now we're just going to set that to the side and start measuring out our dry ingredients. I personally use all-purpose as that's what I have on hand, but sometimes I'll use bread flour. I think the all-purpose tastes just about the same. I'm going to measure like 400 grams out, and I'll have the cups measurement in the description as well. And I don't want any of you to feel intimidated by me using a scale. This is the first time I've ever used a scale for this recipe, and it's genuinely because I just did not feel like doing dishes that day. Also, if you're new here, I'm Amari, and this is just how I cook real food that I actually like to eat. Now I'm gonna go ahead and start on my dry ingredients, and this is where I have some of my best advice. Make sure that you whisk together all of your dry ingredients to make sure everything is evenly distributed before you add in your liquids. And if you don't have a sifter or sieve, just use a whisk like I do. Don't be afraid. I know you can actually see when everything is evenly distributed, but if you're pure of heart, you shouldn't have any issues. So now we're going in with our liquids and that mixture from earlier, so the yeast, the water, and the olive oil. They're finally getting to meet the flour and the salt for the first time ever. And it's gonna get really messy, but don't be afraid. This is a high hydration dough, kind of like the baguettes we made around a week and a half ago in focaccia, so it's gonna be very wet and sticky at the end. So if your dough still has a lot of dry spots like mine at this point, add in about a tablespoon of water at a time until everything is combined together and it forms a sticky mass like you'll see in a little bit. But genuinely, don't be afraid of the dough at this point if it looks messed up, because the dough will know that you're afraid and start to act a fool. It's gonna be very wet and sticky at this stage, and you cannot be afraid. You're gonna think you messed up, but you did not. It's just like this, I promise. You just have to sit and let it wait now for 30 minutes, and we're gonna come back to it. Now that those 30 minutes are up, we're gonna start building gluten in the dough by doing our first set of stretch and folds. You'll just want to pull out from the side and stretch it up some and fold it back towards the middle. The goal of this is to make sure that the flour is strong enough to capture the gas being released by the yeast, so the bread will actually rise and have those little air bubbles on the inside. We're going to do this 3 more times for a total of 4 sets, but you're going to wait 40 minutes between each set, so you should definitely start watching a movie or something. Now you're just going to cover it with a lid, some plastic wrap, or a moist towel and set it to the side. Now it's time for our second set. I post stuff like this all the time, so if you want to see more stuff you can just make at your house, go ahead and subscribe, but be warned, I'm not a health expert or on a diet. The food just tastes good. During your last set of stretch and folds, your dough will essentially reach its final form and be really jiggly and become really smooth. You should also be able to see a few air bubbles under the surface because it's those bubbles that are making the dough so jiggly. You'll get to see mine in a little bit. Now here goes my dough at the end of its final rest. Let me know if you can see the bubbles in the comments. Guys, I found a better video of the air bubbles and the jiggliness you'll see at the end. Perfect, hey! So normally after the last set of stretch and folds, we wait about 30 minutes and go straight into the shaping process, but I saw someone do something different, so I want to try that today. They put their dough into a square shaped pan or a rectangle shaped pan, depending on how much dough you made. I'm making half of the dough recipe because there was an incident with my first one, so I had to make a smaller one that was like half the size. It was this whole thing. So I'm going to be using a rectangle pan. in order to help me with the shaping, just so I can cut it into evenly shaped pieces. So I'm just going to put flour in the bottom of this pan, put my dough in this before I shape it for about 10 minutes, and then just turn it out onto my surface and split it up. But if you do want like a more open and airy crumb, just let it sit in the fridge for about another 12 hours and get even more poofy and jiggly, and you'll be good to go. That's what you would normally do.
So now we're
but
gonna
I
go
want
ahead
to
and
eat
get
this in
our
like an
pan
hour or
floured.
two, so
But if
I'm
you're
not
not
doing
doing
all
this
that.
step, you can totally ignore this. But either way, we're gonna use an uncomfortable amount of flour trying to shape this dough, just because of how sticky it is, and we don't want anything to get stuck to us. So for future reference, we don't really want to handle this dough too much because we don't want to accidentally squeeze out the air bubbles that are inside, because we need those air bubbles to get the right texture. So you can kind of help it out the bowl during the shaping process, but you don't want to squeeze it. You want to use essentially almost not their pressure, so like really light tender touches, like a baby. After all of that shaking, the dough didn't fill the pan like I thought it would, but don't forget to flour your parchment paper before you put any of your dough on there. And while you're doing that, you want to make sure you get some of that flour on your hands and fingertips too, just so it doesn't stick to you during the next part. This is me checking to see if it took over the pan in the 3 minutes I looked away, but now we're going to go to the shaping process. And you're going to want to cover your surface you're going to be working on in as much flour as you feel comfortable with, because we want to absolutely make sure that it doesn't get stuck to us and we don't have to use too much pressure and squeeze out the bubbles on accident. Also, by as much as you're comfortable with, I really mean like 2 tablespoons. And now we're going to want to turn the dough out onto the surface without actually squeezing it or like pulling it out by squeezing. We kind of just want it to fall out onto the surface. Funny enough, part of mine fell into the one section that didn't get that much flour on it. And now I'm going to start the process of shaping this, but remember, don't squeeze it when you're shaping. Make sure your hands are just covered in flour and slide your fingers under and stretch. Don't necessarily pull it or squeeze out any of the bubbles. The bubbles will be visible. Now when it comes to size and shaping, you do just want it to be a uniform size. Normally these are in one giant loaf, but for me, I cut mine down to whatever size I want my sandwich to be with my bench scraper, or I just use a pizza cutter. But if you don't have either of those, you can also just use a sharp knife. Even here, you'll want to make sure whatever you're using is covered in flour. And after you get it the size you want, you can use a flour spatula or even your flour hand just to scoop and lift it up and put it straight onto your pan. I think this is the smoothest and fastest I've ever completed this part of the process, but now we're just going to sprinkle more flour on top and let these sit on the tray for about 20 minutes. Also, if you change your mind and decide you want to cut them smaller on the tray, that's always an option too. I ended up cutting the one in the right in half, so I had like one big piece and 2 small ones. And while you wait, go ahead and preheat your oven to 400 degrees. Like with the baguettes, you're gonna need a dish of water or ice cubes sitting in the bottom of the stove for steam. And now we just bake these for 30 minutes or until they're golden brown. These pretty much came out perfect and I was really excited and happy about it. And I couldn't stop smiling when I saw them when I took them out, because I was just like, yes, these look so good. Now let's check out the inside. The inside was great, but when you let it sit overnight, you get bigger bubbles. And if you want to see more videos like this, just make sure you like and subscribe. See you guys on Friday.